everybody, welcome back to Biblical Greek Made Easy. This is class 1 of module 2. And guys, you made it to module 2. Isn't that exciting? We got a new background for you back here just to celebrate the occasion. And module 2 is really huge. We're going to learn verbs, we're going to learn participles, we're going to learn a bunch of those really important elements that you need in order to translate. And we're going to start with verbs today. And here's the tip of the day for you, okay? Go slow, but keep moving. Okay, we're going to introduce verbs, which are going to bring a new level of complexity to what's going on in the Greek world. And it's not overwhelmingly hard. I mean, hundreds, thousands, millions of students have learned this before and have done just fine. But just be aware that it is a new layer of stuff that we're introducing to you. And so go slow, review, get it mastered, get it nicked, so to speak. But keep moving, okay? Don't get bogged down, don't stop. I will tell you that so many students throughout my years of teaching, they do that first semester where you do nouns and pronouns and, start to scratch the surface of verbs, and they leave for Christmas. They come back after Christmas break in college, and they don't take the second semester, and they just quit, and they never go back to Greek. Guys, that's a tragedy. We don't want to see that happen. Fighting through verbs, learning what you need to for verbs and all the other things that go with it are so important to be able to read and translate God's word in the original language. And so let me encourage you to go slow, but keep moving, okay? Keep making progress, keep spending a little time every day at your pace, of course, but as you can, try to just really keep moving and growing with Greek verbs here in Module 2, okay? And so let me just remind you, this class, like some of the others, we're actually covering 2 chapters. And so there's an introduction chapter to verbs. If you're following along in the Mounts textbook, there's an introductory chapter to verbs that just kind of gives you the flyover. We'll cover that, and we'll cover chapter 16, which covers present active indicative verbs. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about why this matters. So verbs are the key building blocks. They're key building blocks to learning any language, okay? Little kids learn nouns first, typically, okay? They learn verbs later, and that's sort of how we've learned Greek as well. But eventually, if we want to be able to read and translate on a higher level, we just have to know verbs, and so that's going to be really key. And learning Greek verbs is unquestionably the next level of translation and engagement with the Greek New Testament. Like I was saying, a lot of people get the Greek system down. They figure out the Greek noun system and how the definite articles work and how cases work and all that kind of stuff, but then they don't get a whole lot further than that, okay? We want you to go all the way. We want you to break on through to the other side. We want you to learn that next level, which is really Greek verbs, okay? And that's what we're going to do. So let's do a little grade school English review once again. So in English, a verb is a word that describes an action or a state of being, okay? This is probably fairly basic, but this is where we start. A verb in English or in any language, it's a word that describes an action or a state of being. So in that sentence right there, the word is our first verb there, okay? And then describes is also a verb. And then being there at the end, that could be a verb, but it's kind of being used in a noun structure right now, so we won't make that too complicated. But it's those action words, okay? Those words that describe an action or a state of being, okay? Now, verbs are going to have, they're going to be first person, second person, or third person, okay? We've seen this a little bit with pronouns, but verbs are going to have this too. So first person is I, so I go, I look, etc. Second person is you look, you go, you throw, whatever. Third person is he, she, it. Could also be they, okay? Now verbs can be singular or they can be plural. So in other words, I do something versus we do something. And I will note here, I'll say this again, but second person singular and second person plural is different in Greek, like in every other language in the history of the world, except for English, okay? In English, you singular and you plural are the same word, and it causes all sorts of confusion. And maybe you'll hear me rant about that at some point. But in Greek, again, like in every other language, like the normal the way it should be, you singular and you plural are separate. You can always tell the difference there, okay? Now, verbs are going to agree with their subject in person and number, okay? So you think about this in English, we say, you are awesome. Or we say, I am awesome. Notice this is a form of the to be verb, okay? So we use these different forms, you are versus I am. We wouldn't say you am awesome or you is awesome unless we were trying to be ironic and funny by using an incorrect form. But you notice how it changes to agree with the subject, okay? That's going to be the same thing in Greek, is that we're always going to have the verb agree with the subject, okay? All right, so before we go any deeper into verbs, I want to introduce you to some of the language that we use when we're talking about verbs, okay? Now, if you have a background in learning other languages, or you've done some Greek before, or that sort of thing, this may be review to you, but if you haven't, if language is new to you or you struggle with languages, it's good for us to cover these because this is language that we don't use very often unless we're learning phonics, English, Greek, some sort of a language where we have to use this kind of technical language. And it's not too technical, it's not too deep, but it is specific to this kind of learning. And because this is Biblical Greek made easy, I want to do that hard work for you and set you up for success. And so if you're taking notes, I've got these 4 boxes here on the screen that will just, I think, be helpful for you to kind of place these boxes in your head right away. Top left, you see tense. Okay, we're going to talk about tense here in just a minute. And then voice is the top right. And I don't know, if you're like me, I tend to be kind of spatial in the way that I learn, so it may be helpful to pause the video and get a piece of paper and kind of draw these quadrants, and you can take notes underneath them so you can just kind of spatially get a sense of what's going on here. How often do you talk about tense? How often do you talk about voice of verbs on a daily or weekly basis? Almost never, right? And so I just want you to have the tools to be able to approach this. And then mood. And we're not talking about grumpy, angry, etc. here. We're talking about a different thing, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then finally, person and number, which we talked about person and number already up above a little bit. And so we just need to know that we put those two together because they're smaller and because they're almost always tied together, at least when we're talking about verbs, okay? So these are those 4 boxes that I want you to be aware of. And let's go ahead and start talking about these one at a time and just kind of decode these for you. So verbs have tense. That was that first box that we saw, okay? Now when we talk about tense, we're talking about past, present, future. We're talking about when the action of a verb occurs, okay? That's really what tense is about. You may be familiar with this one because we talk about verb tense in English as well. I study versus I studied, past tense, versus I will study, that sort of thing, okay? So kind of past, present, future when we talk about tense. There's going to be 5 different tenses that we learn in our Greek studies here, and they're going to be really powerful. They're going to do a lot of different things, and so tense is going to be first. Now, I showed you those 4 boxes. I want to give you a wrinkle. You can put this under tense because it's connected with that. Actually, it's contained within the tense, but it's a different thing, and it's something we call aspect. So what is aspect? This is something I guarantee you don't talk about on a weekly basis, okay? So we want to make sure we go slow, but we keep moving here when we talk about aspect. So aspect tells us whether the action of the verb is a couple kind of technical terms here. It is either completed or continuous, okay? So you see the examples here. I eat is an example of a completed action, okay? Now, completed sounds past tense, doesn't it? But in that case, that's not what this means. And I'll warn you, some of the grammatical language here is kind of confusing and not super helpful. As we encounter these elements in the actual course and the text, I'll break these down for you. I'll tell you what they mean. I'll tell you the ones that aren't helpful and that are. But for right now, I eat is an example of completed, in the sense that it tells you that the verb, eat in this case, that it happened, but it doesn't tell you much else, okay? So go ahead and put a pin in that one and look at the other example, because that one will actually make it easier to understand the first, okay? A second type of aspect is something we call continuous, okay? A continuous aspect. And you see the example there, I am eating. You see, it's like this continuous idea. It's like it's happening right now. I am eating. There's a present element to that, but the ing suggests that it's going on right now. Even if I said I was eating, okay, that's still a continuous aspect because the ing, it gives you the sense that it's happening. I was eating, like at the moment of this sentence, like the time that this sentence introduces, it's going on right then, okay? So when we talk about aspect, that's what we mean. What kind of action? Is the action completed? Is it just that it happened and that's it? Or is it continuous? Is it ongoing? Okay, now here's kind of a wrinkle for you that in Greek, aspect is actually more important than the tense, than the time element. Now those tense words that we're going to use are going to contain aspect in them, and I'll tell you more about that later, but the kind, whether it's completed or whether it's continuous, is going to be more important for Greek than the actual time element, past, present, etc. Okay? So when we talk about tense, there's a lot going on there. There's the time, and then aspect is contained within the tense in Greek. Okay? The second option is voice. And when we talk about voice, we're talking about either active voice or passive voice. In the sentence, I threw the bear cub. Okay? Imagine have a cute little bear cub, and maybe we're going to toss him, throw him to his mama or something like that. I threw the bear cub. Notice that I is the subject, threw is the verb, and the bear cub is the direct object, okay? And in this case, since we have an active verb, the subject, I, is performing the action through to the direct object, the bear cub, okay? But in the second example here, I was thrown by the bear cub. Notice we've got the same subject, I. We've got the same direct object, the bear cub, okay? But we've taken this verb in English, and rather than making it active, through, we make it passive, which in English turns it to was thrown, okay? So making that one little switch, now I was thrown by the bear cub. Now the subject is receiving the action of the verb performed by the direct object. See how we just flipped everything around, okay? Now notice that we changed the form of the verb. It went from through to thrown, okay? We put was on the front of there. You're going to notice English does that a ton. To change tenses in English, we add helping words, usually forms of to be, okay? And so that's what's gone on here, and then we needed by there to show, to make the bear cub piece make sense. But so we changed a bunch, we added a bunch. That's going to be a pretty simple change in Greek, and we're going to get that active to passive switch. But when we talk about voice, this is what we're talking about, active voice or passive voice, okay? Remember, we got to get these basics down, the English basics down, in order to understand what's going on. So there's going to be tense, which contains aspect. There's going to be voice. And then a third thing I need to show you is that verbs are going to have mood. Okay? Now, this isn't like happy, grumpy, whatever. Okay? Not that kind of mood. Mood talks about what sphere of reality the action is happening in. Okay? So I'll just tell you right away, for a number of chapters here, the primary mood we're going to talk about, by far the most common in the New Testament, is called the indicative mood. The indicative mood. You think about words like indicate or index or something like that, right? The indicative mood, that's going to be in the realm of reality. We're presenting things in the realm of reality. Most of conversations happen in the indicative mood. Later on, we'll learn some other moods that deal with the realm of uncertainty or the realm of possibility, that sort of thing, okay? And so again, we don't think about that in English too much, about different moods. We just talk and don't really consider what sort of moods we're using. They do show up in English as well. An example of the mood of possibility in English would be like, tomorrow I may go to the store, that sort of thing, right? Where you use a word like may or might. It's the realm of possibility rather than the realm of reality, rather than I am going to the store. That's different, okay? So we're going to talk about mood when it comes to verbs as well. But that said, if this is getting a little too complex for you, totally put a pin in mood for right now. Indicative is all you're going to need to know for the next several class periods, okay? So don't worry about that too much. We're mostly going to be dealing with other stuff. Mood will come down the road, okay? So now, Greek verbs are going to be made up of a stem, okay, which is going to be kind of the basic building block of the verb. That's how we're going to recognize it as a particular verb. It's going to have a connecting vowel, which I talked about in a little bit. And then it's going to have a personal ending, okay? It's going to have the ending that matches the subject that it goes with. Notice how we saw in that example, I am awesome versus you are awesome, and the whole word changed there, okay? For most of our Greek words, we're going to see just the ending change in order to agree with the subject, okay? So the lexical form of a verb, by lexical form, remember we just mean that form that you're going to look up in the dictionary, the basic verb. In English, those are infinitives, so to, go, to, throw. That's what we think of as the lexical form. In Spanish, they end in AR or ER or whatever, also the infinitive form. In Greek, it's going to be the first person singular of what we're going to learn today, the present active indicative, that first person singular. So I go, I throw, I hear. Those are going to be the lexical forms of the verbs, okay? So here's the review. Verbs have tense, verbs have voice, verbs have mood, verbs have person and number, and then remember they still have that aspect piece, which you're not going to need to say aspect like when you're parsing. These are the elements you see on the board right here. This is what you're going to need to know when you're parsing it. Tense, voice, mood, person, number, and then we usually say lexical form. In other words, what verb does this come from? What Greek verb does this come from? And how do you translate it? That's kind of the parsing rundown. Aspect is also part of that, but you're not saying that as part of your parsing, okay? So let's go ahead and learn our first verb tense combo, and here we go. It's called the present active indicative. Now those words all mean something. Present is the tense, it's present tense, it's happening right now. Active is the voice, okay? So it's active voice rather than passive voice, okay? And then it's indicative, that's our mood, okay? So that's tense, voice, mood, those three words you see right there, okay? And remember, indicative is all we're going to be dealing with for quite a while, so don't worry about that too much, okay? So the present active indicative is the first and most basic form of the verb that we're going to learn, okay? And so maybe a little bit confusing right out of the gate. We talked about that aspect, how aspect is contained in the tense. Well, present active indicative, present tense, actually contains two different aspects, okay? So we can translate this as I study, which we would call like that undefined aspect. It's not telling us much about when or how this is working, it's just telling us that it's happening, okay? Versus the continuous I am studying, okay? I am studying, that continuous aspect. You can translate present active indicative verbs either way, and we're going to use context to help us determine which one of those makes the most sense, okay? So let's go ahead and build the present active indicative, okay? We're going to use the present tense stem, okay, which is going to be, when you look up a verb in its lexical form, it's going to be that, usually the first couple letters of whatever verb we're looking at, okay? And then we're going to have a connecting vowel. I mentioned connecting vowel a little bit earlier. And then our primary personal endings. Let's talk about these elements in turn. So stem, as we said, is the basic form of the verb with no endings on it. Okay, we haven't put endings on the stem yet. The stem is like like maybe the engine of the train before we hook any cars to it, that sort of thing. Okay? The connecting vowel is a vowel that's going to go between the stem and the ending, and its sole purpose is to help with pronunciation, okay? Now, some Greek teachers get really particular about connecting vowels, okay? Later on, we're going to learn contract verbs, where there's a change that happens with the connecting vowel in the ending. Maybe we have a lengthening or something. I promise you it's no big deal at all, okay? It's just a little wrinkle, a little speed bump we have to move over, no big deal. But some Greek teachers make that a huge deal, and they make you memorize these, like, complicated contract charts and all that kind of stuff. And man, that is just such a waste of time. We absolutely do not need to do that. We're not going to do that because we want to save our brain space for other stuff, right? This is Biblical Greek made easy. We're not going to make things unnecessarily complex, okay? So just know that the connecting vowel may show up. There may be an extra vowel there between the stem and the ending, okay? So just know that a connecting vowel may show up between the stem and the ending, and that's totally okay. The only purpose is to smooth out that pronunciation, okay? Because they think it sounds better to say lumen rather than to say lumen, for example, okay? So that's just a Greek thing. And then we've got a personal ending on the end. That's going to be the ending that tells us the person and number of the subject, okay? It's going to agree with the subject in person and number. Okay, so here's what the first paradigm looks like for you, okay? Luo, by the way, means I loose. Can also mean I destroy in like a longer kind of sense, but it's only 3 letters and its lexical form there, luo. And so for that reason, it becomes a real basic, verb for us that we're gonna use a lot, okay? So you see down the left side there, luo, and then luace is that second person singular, and then lua, and then luamen, and then luete, and then luusi or luusin, okay? A few things to tell you about here, couple wrinkles, okay? So by the way, I would memorize those 6 words in order as quickly as possible, because this will help you with your endings. It'll help you with understanding what's going on with verbs. Just lua, lues, lue, luamen, luete, luusi, okay? Get those in your head as quickly as possible, okay? So notice that they're all different. We don't have any repeating forms, okay? Notice, as I mentioned before, second person singular and second person plural are incredibly different. You're not going to get those confused. Luace and luete, very different, okay? One of them means you loose, singular. One of them means y'all loose or you loose, plural. And we're never going to confuse those in Greek, okay? That's a good deal. So notice I have for you there the form with all of its parts together there in the left-hand column. The connecting vowel is listed there for you so you know. Notice that the connecting vowel changes based on what the ending is, and again, it's just there to make translation sound better. So it can change and morph a little bit. Again, you can memorize that if you want to, if you really want to spend some time going through that. By all means, be my guest. I just think it's better to spend our brain power at other places. And then we see the ending. These endings are going to be relatively regular. There's going to be 4 sets of endings that we look at, and we'll look at those charts a little bit later. But for right now, those are the endings kind of by themselves. And by the way, kind of like we saw with nouns and the noun endings, just looking at the endings by themselves floating in space is not super helpful to me. I like to see them connected to words, and so that's why I think by far the most helpful list on this screen is that form list there. Luo, lues, lue, luamen, luete, luusi. Because the ending is connected. And actually notice that there's sometimes changes. Notice on the third person plural, the ending is nu sigma iota, but the nu has dropped out. You might look to you like the nu has moved to the end, right? But the nu has dropped out because it's next to that sigma, so we get luusi. Now what's going on with that nu in brackets there? Well, like we've seen with nouns, sometimes there's a movable nu, and this is also just a pronunciation thing. If the word that follows this third person plural verb in the sentence, if it starts with a vowel, then it will have the nu. If it doesn't start with a vowel, it will not have the nu, okay? And so it's either luusi or luusin. Either one is correct. It changes based on what shows up in the sentence. This is kind of like in English, an apple versus a banana, right? That sort of thing. We change that based on the first letter of the next word. Why? Well, just because we think it sounds better. apple, that sounds like a little kid talking, right? We don't think that sounds super great. So for that reason, we avoid that and put that little rule in about a and an, okay? So this is your first form. Spend some time with this, get it down. Practice using this in sentences if you can, and this will help you. These endings will show up again. This verb lua will show up again in other places, but to make sure you get kind of these basics down is really important. So a couple other pieces here as we start to close things down. First of all, let's talk about personal pronouns and verbs. Verbs do not need personal pronouns. Why do you think that is? Yeah, it's because it's contained in the verb itself, right? We already said that a verb has to agree with its subject and person and number. So if we know the person and number based on the verb, we don't need the pronoun out front, do we? Or even the subject at all. No, we totally don't. A lot of other languages are like this too. Spanish is like that. You can say comprendo for I understand, or you can say yo comprendo. Yo comprendo is maybe a little bit more specific, and that's okay. And Greek will do the same thing. Sometimes it'll have it to be more specific or to be stronger, to emphasize things. You see that there, that last bullet point. If they do use a pronoun, it will be for emphasis or to clarify the gender of the subject. Let me show you an example of how that works, okay? So note, autos there, our third person personal pronoun. It can be used for this purpose with first person and second person verbs as well. Even though it's a third person pronoun, we can use it as a gender clarifier. So you see in this example here, aute leges anthropois, okay? If we just had leges anthropois there, it would be you speak to the people, okay? You speak to the people. The problem is since we don't have gender in second person, or in first person, but in this case, second person, we don't know if we're speaking to a male or a female. We could put aute on there, which means essentially she. And so this is one of those where a Greek student might struggle with this. You speak to the people. Hold on. How does this go? She is third person. What you would do is you would just leave the she part untranslated. You would need to note to yourself that it's a female speaker, or you'd have to notate that or communicate that somehow. But that's what's going on here in Greek, is that aute, that form of autos, is telling us the gender of the speaker, okay? So third person, of course, you would use just autos and it wouldn't seem weird, right? It would just be aute lege anthropois, she speaks to the people, okay? But if you wanted that second person, you speak, autos can be used for this purpose, okay? So here are the 6 verbs you learn this chapter, these 6 vocabulary words, and they're, other than ami, which is the to be verb, which you learned a while back, these are all the verbs you know at this point. So akuo means I hear, like the word acoustics, okay? Blepo, I see. Echo, I have or I hold. Okay. Lego, I speak. Luo, we saw as our paradigmatic verb, means I loose or I destroy. And then pistuo means I believe or I have faith or I entrust. Any of those things are possible. So I think you've learned pistis before. That's the noun for faith. So pistuo is the verb. You've learned logos, which is the word for word. Lego is the verb for I speak, right? So you'll notice a lot of that overlap there between the verbs and the nouns, okay? So these are the 6. Make sure you know these well. I would say practice writing all of these with the correct endings on them. You know what the ending should be. It's just, if you remember luo, lues, lue, luamen, luete, luusi, if you can have that in your brain, if you can have that in your tool belt, that'll help you a ton, because then when you encounter one of these forms, you'll know how to parse it right away, okay? All right, now we've done a lot of good work with verbs here today, but I want to give you a couple practice sentences that we do together just to see how these play themselves out. And if you're ready to go, if you're ready to dig into this, that's okay. Feel free to shut off the video and go ahead and jump to the exercises for this week, to the homework, even the quiz if you're ready, that sort of thing. But I want to just talk through a couple sentences that I've prepared for us that are just simple. They're vocabulary that we already have, just to help us with this. So the first one there, blepo tain basilean ton uranon. Okay, so you notice the verb right away. It's a verb that you've already had, blepo, or it's a verb you're having this chapter, I should say. Blepo, what we're going to do is we're going to want to parse that once we recognize that it's the verb. And remember those elements of parsing that we're going to use. We're going to say tense, voice, mood. Let's go ahead and start there. Tense, you only know one tense right now, which is present, okay? You only know one voice, which is active, and you only know one mood, which is indicative, okay? So it's really easy at this point. You're going to say present, active, indicative. And remember, all of those words are important. They're all telling us something about what's going on with this verb. So blepo, present, active, indicative. Now, we want to identify the person and the number as well. Can you do that? Can you tell me what person and number this is? Yeah, it's first person singular, right? It's our lexical form. That omega ending is that hint that it's the first person singular ending. So do you happen to remember what we said it means? Yeah, I see or I look. Yep, I see. We'll go with here. And then we have tain basilean. We've got our accusative there, so it's going to be our direct object. It's going to receive the action of the verb. So I see the kingdom. And then we have ton uranon. That's a genitive there, a genitive plural, and it means of the heavens. Okay? So I see the kingdom of the heavens, or the kingdom of heaven is usually how we translate that, right? It's plural there because we get it as the plural from Hebrew, that sort of thing. So I see the kingdom of the heavens. So notice how we identified our verb right away. We noticed the different parts that went along with it, and we translated those. But parsing the verb was a big deal, right? We needed to make sure we parsed that correctly. Let's do one more just to kind of get our feet wet here. Pistues ta euangelion tu theou. Okay, so where's our verb? Yep, there it is. Pistues, right there in the front. Pistues. What's the lexical form of that verb? Can you tell me? Yeah, it's pistuo, right, which is the first person singular form. Now again, we need to do tense, voice, and mood for pistues. And again, you only know one of each of those, so it's going to be what? You want to say it for me? Present, active, indicative. Very good. Yes. So present, active, indicative. And then we need a person and a number. Okay. Yep. Second person singular is correct. Pistues. And we know that because of that ending, right? That ending is telling us that second person singular. So it means you believe, or you entrust, or you are faithful, something like that. We'll go with believe for this time. You believe ta euangelion, the gospel, to theou, of God. You believe the gospel of God. But notice what we did there, right? We recognized the verb, we dealt with it on its terms, with its parts, and from there, we grew, we were able to identify it, and we dealt with it for what it was. We translated it correctly, and that's how we do it. So guys, that is our introduction to verbs. That is our first tense. Let's review a little bit. We started in a good spot here, didn't we? We did kind of the flyover of verbs in English and in Greek. We learned the first verb tense combo, which is that present active indicative combination. And we learned the first few verbs, vocabulary words, that are some of the most occurring in the New Testament. Okay, these show up lots and lots. We're going to see them a lot, and so we're starting to get our ankles wet here in the world of Greek verbs. So I'm excited for you. Great work today. Remember what we said at the beginning. Go slow, but keep moving. Watch this again. Review it if you need to. Get really good at vocabulary. Get really good at the grammar. And that will help you with your translation as you're reading and translating the Greek New Testament. All right? Happy studying, friends. We'll see you next time.